Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, along with George Eichorn. George, how you doing tonight? Back from Motown.
Motown it is, baby. Home of the Tigers.
And we want to welcome Duke Sims to the broadcast. And Duke, a lot of people are familiar with you back home in Detroit. Thanks for joining us tonight, Duke. It's thrilling to have you on the broadcast.
Well, Scott, I appreciate the opportunity to get on the boob tube, I guess they call it now, and whatever it's called, and visit with you about whatever subjects we get to talk about. It's been a long time since I've had this opportunity to visit with anybody about the game. I have a couple good friends who are writers here in Las Vegas who, out of common courtesy, they'll kind of throw my name into paper every once in a while, but that's it.
Well, the way you and I came in contact with, which we'll get to a little while, is through Facebook because we are Facebook friends. So I'll get into that story later in the broadcast, okay? But
Sure.
first of all, Duke, when you talk about being with the Tigers, your first game, obviously, you couldn't come in with a bigger bang than you did. So as a Detroit Tiger, you go 3 for 5, facing Cy Young Award winner Gaylord Perry, and I know that you had a game-tying double. Tell us what that moment was about, Duke.
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing because under the rules in the basic agreement, you had 3 days to join a ball club when you went through the waiver list or they made a trade for you. And I didn't know that I was on the block. Obviously, they don't tell ball players what they're doing with you. And I came to the ballpark, and there was my empty locker with the bag packed. And I said, "Oh, does anybody know where I'm going?" They said, "Skip wants to see you." And so I went in and saw Mr. Alston. Well, I said, "Walt," he said, "Duke," he said, I really didn't want to do this. We didn't want to do it. He said, "But the club's in 8th place, and it doesn't look like we're going to do much between now and the end of the year." And it was in August. And I was hitting about $190, and I was playing defensively well, but I wasn't swinging the bat real good. So he said, "You've been picked up by the Tigers, and they've got a chance to win the Eastern Division." And I said, "Well, that's great. I mean, I love that ballpark, number one. And number two, I knew everybody on that ball club because I'd played against them for so many years when I was in Cleveland." So I got on a plane. I went right to the airport. I got my suitcase, packed up some clothes, and then went to the airport. Well, now I fly, and I get into Cleveland at about 11 o'clock at night. And of course, now I go to the hotel, I check in. Well, there are some watering spots in Cleveland that I used to hang out to when I was young, single, dumb. And I decided to go say hello to some people I hadn't seen for 2 or 3 years. And I went over, and of course, as things happen, the place closes like 2. And by the time you go have breakfast, it's 4, and then you go back to the hotel and go to sleep. So I get up the next day, I go to the ballpark. Now I figure that I'm not going to be active for another 2 days. I'm just joining the ball club. So I get dressed, go out to the outfield, do my work, and the bat boy comes out and says, "Mr. Martin wants to see you." And I said, "Oh, okay." Well, I mean, he's the manager. He has a right to call his ball players up when he wants to. So I ran into the dugout, and he says, "You're starting today." And I said, "What?" I said, I'm not active." He said, "Yeah, you are. As a matter of fact, you're starting, and you're going to be hitting 4th." I said, "4th?" I mean, I got all these Thunder bats that are in this lineup, right? He said, "Yeah." So as it turns out, the first inning I hit into a double play, and I went, "Uh-oh, this is not good. This is not good." Finish the inning, and I go put my stuff on, and of course the rest is history. I hit the dry side of one of Gaylord spitters in the seats in the 11th inning, and we won that ball game. Well, the really funny part about it is we leave and go back to Detroit, and my first at bat, I'm in the on deck circle, and when I go to the batter's box, I hear all of this, what I thought was booing. And I thought, Jesus, it's been a long time since I've been in Detroit. Give me a break. So I finished the at bat. I came back. Next inning, I'm sitting down next to Gates Bound, and I said, Gates, I said, I know this is a great sports town. Detroit's always been one of the guys, one of the towns that, I mean, they've supported their football, their basketball, their hockey, their baseball. I mean, it's just a great sports town. I said, why are they booing me? Of course, Gates has his own language, and he said, to paraphrase it all, they weren't booing you, Duke. They were saying, Duke. I said, boy, that makes me feel a lot better. And I think I went 2 for 3 that day, and we won the ball game. But I thought, wow, what a town. This is worse than New York.
Well, yeah, I guess Duke and boo, obviously, for all of us phonetic people, definitely realize there's definitely some similarity between them. So let's go ahead and talk about the great stretch run that you had with the Tigers, Duke. Okay, you go 316. You had a 10-game winning streak, and you had some game-tying hits along the way. And of course, you're catching for the Tigers that season. And as you alluded to moments ago, that Detroit won the American League East under Billy Martin, and yet you played in all 5 games for the American League Championships versus the Oakland A's. Why don't you talk about some of the stories leading up to that, and then we'll talk about Larry LeGros shortly.
You know, first of all, Detroit was a left-handed hitter's ballpark. I mean, it really was. So it fit me like a hand in glove. And during the course of that 2-month run, because quite frankly, what happened is Freehand had broken his thumb. Tom Haller was on that staff along with the bench coach who's managed the Tigers off and on over the years, been there forever. And when they got me because Billy knew that I could throw, and they wanted somebody to be able to contain the clubs in the league that had speed, and Oakland had plenty of it. So that was maybe the primary reason I was there. And it just happened that my eyes had gone bad, and I was wearing glasses off and on the West Coast. When I got to Detroit, I decided to put my glasses on and leave them on. And now the baseball got clearer, and I got into this moment where, my God, I got a chance to go to the playoffs and maybe to the World Series with this club. They've been there. They know how to win. And I got a pitching staff that's quite good and is experienced. Well, when you have an experienced pitching staff and you have a catcher who knows that staff, it makes it a lot easier as you transition into it. And of course, they picked up Woody Fryman.
Right.
Yeah.
He came over from the Phillies.
Right.
And I knew him as a kid. We were both kids, and he was with Pittsburgh and I was with Cleveland. And he came in and just did a stellar job. I think he was 10-2 or 10-1.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, and his ERA was something like 130. I mean, when he needed to strike out, he'd strike a guy out. And if he needed a double play, he knew where to throw the ball, and you knew how to get him to do that double play. So having that pre-knowledge helped me behind the plate. So you could sit and visit with them, the starting pitcher, and you knew the outfielders, the infielders, and if there was an incident one time, somebody stole second base, and I had him thrown out, and I thought he was out, and they called him safe. And after the inning was over, I went over to McAuliffe, and I said, Dick, I said, the ball was there in plenty of time. He was out. He said, yeah, but the ball got there quicker than I'm used to. And what Dick used to have to do with Freehand, this is no aspersion, is Freehand was quick out of the box with his hands to get the ball out, but he didn't have the exceptionally strong arm. I had a stronger arm. And he said, the ball got there so quick, I missed the tag. I said, just go to the bag and I'll get you the ball. Be someplace that you can make a tag, because we don't need to do this anymore. So, that was one instance. And once we had that discussion, then he adopted immediately to my arm as opposed to what he'd been used to for 10 years, 12 years.
Yeah.
And K-Line was sneaky. He's a great ball player and a Hall of Famer by all measurements. And I remember when I was with Cleveland, I used to watch him in right field, because if he felt like the game might be on the line, he would sneak out. He would start to sneak in on from right field because he would go to first base on you.
Right.
And so that year, he did it to me twice, and it was bang bang because I kept looking at him and I said, he's going to first base because we had a tight game with the Tigers when I was with the Indians, and he's going to get the third out on me. And that's so I come out of the box running as hard as I could and just barely beat him. In the fourth game, is it the third game, second or third game, Al's in right field, and we got a situation where he does the same thing, except I recognize he's not coming to me at home plate. He's going to cut the run off at third before the run can score, and we're in the extra innings. And that's when Aurelio got handcuffed because he didn't think Al was coming that way. He thought he was going home. And of course, we lost that ball game in extra innings. And I said, only a few people in baseball would think like that and have the arm with the ability, knowing if this thing is hit real sharp, hard at me, one hop, I'm going to third base. I should have thought better and alerted the entire infield that there was something different going on because they got their backs. They're not standing there looking out all over the place.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it cost us that ball game. I think we got beat 2-1 or something like that. And I thought, and I told Al about it. I said, you're a sneaky bastard.
So
You had a very good relationship with Billy Martin, Duke. I think that a lot of us in Detroit remember that you seem to be like one of his favorite guys. And I mean that in a positive sense. Billy was feisty, fiery, foul-mouthed at times. And obviously you had conservative general manager Jim Campbell in the front office. And quite frankly, a lot of people were surprised that Campbell even hired Billy Martin to manage the team, knowing how fiery he was. So what are your reflections on Billy? I know you had obviously a very good relationship with him.
Well, Billy was the kind of guy that when he managed, now I'll give you two comparisons. Walt Alston, you never knew what he was thinking because he never said anything. I mean, Mr. Alston would sit there and run the team, and the game was over, win, lose, or draw, and just Walt was gone. Billy, on the other hand, is involved. And I don't know if many people know this or have heard about it, but Billy was he would read war books about battle maneuvers and things of that nature. So he was always an individual who would attempt or try to motivate you into doing something that you were really not comfortable with. And if you didn't do it, then there would be a little bit of a discussion about it.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I knew about Billy above anything else, because I had talks with him before when he was with the Twins, was that Billy didn't really care anything about more than if you're on this field and you've got to run, you run as hard as you can, as fast as you can to do whatever it is you can to try to help this club win a game, period. That's the only thing he really cared about. Well, when you're a catcher, you don't obviously always have the greatest speed. Now, there's some guys that ran pretty good. Munson ran pretty good, and a couple, two or three others. But the rest of us, he throws in a bag, and you're a couple of days and 2 choo-choo trains to get to first base, that kind of thing. But if you worked hard and played it as hard as you could possibly do it, he would gravitate to you. You didn't have to gravitate to him.
Yeah, yeah.
So the guys who didn't really associate that kind of relationship with him were the ones that you'd see him say something in the paper about, because they had done something that game that if they'd have done it just a little bit of different, maybe that game would have been a little bit different, maybe a win. And that's how he thought.
Yeah.
And so I was always that kind of a player. I mean, I was short on talent, but long on heart.
Yeah.
So whatever I'm going to do it as best I can, as hard as I can, because I never wanted to go back into the dugout with any manager and have him look at me with those looks that you get when you know that you should have done it differently.
Exactly.
So with that said, okay, during the American League Championship Series, we all know what happened there. Game 2 is when Bert Campaneris threw the bat at Laren LeGros, who ended up being hit in the ankle. Did Billy Martin put you up to that, or is that something you decided to do on your own in terms of saying to go ahead?
I think it was a consensus. Now, we had Reggie out of the lineup, and we knew that the driver in that club, if you could keep him off the bases, is Campaneris.
Right.
Okay. And we're in a short series, 5 games. Now, we'd already had a couple fights with him, one out in Oakland, one in in Detroit, where the one in Detroit, for example, I was behind the plate, and Bill Slayback, Angel Manguel's a hitter. Bill Slayback throws a breaking ball that backs up on him, and it spins like that, hits off my glove because it's behind him. And I managed to knock the ball down. Manguel now goes, and we got a man on third base. Manguel goes to the mound.
Huh.
You want to have a ticklish situation. No, there's no timeout. The umpire said the ball's in play, but I got a pitcher that's going to we're going to have a fight. I've got a man on third base. What do? Go with my pitcher, protect him, let the run score? No, that doesn't work too good. But so I managed to get the ball, and we had this big breakdown at home plate. And so in that series, if you're trying to get to the World Series, which we were, you're going to figure out, especially if you're the kind of guy like Billy is, what do I have to do to be able to mitigate some of the circumstances over the next 2 games or 3 games, as the case may be.
Right.
So we had a little confab, he and I. He said, I want you to hit him. I said, where? He said, I don't care where you hit him, just hit him. So I got together with Laren, and I said to Laren, look, here's what I'm going to do, and I want you to do this. I'm going to call a breaking ball because every camera in America is on my crotch. And I said, I'm going to call a breaking ball, and I want you to hit him in the leg.
Right.
Well, I mean, he couldn't have done it better if he'd have drawn it up on a postcard. He hit him right in the ankle and knocked his feet out from underneath me. And when he hit, I mean, I didn't even think about it. When Cappy went down, he jumped up and he threw the bat and ran. And I went, what's going on here? Well, now, the next day, of course, or the famous picture that has been in Detroit history forever is Laren doing a squat with the bat going poof, 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 over the top of his head. And, of course, Cappy was going to the dugout, and their dugout cleared, and we cleared. And if there was going to be some real serious blows thrown, they were going to lose. It was just that bad because the other one that we had in Detroit, Epstein, a big guy, strong guy, a good guy, he comes in to protect Angel and the rest of them at home plate in Detroit. And of course, my friend in left field by the name of Willie Horton I didn't know he could run that fast. Well, I was being dragged around by the White Rat from second base. I was out of it. He had me by the back of the straps, and I'm running in circles trying to get away from him, and I can't get to anybody. So it was intentional. But if you were to look at the film from center field, I obviously called a breaking ball, and the ball must have just got away from Laren. Backup slider.
Yes.
Story.
Yeah, I went on to talk to Bert Campaneris many years later when I was working for the Tampa Tribune, and he was at one of those Florida State League All-Star events. And he admitted to me that he did overreact a little bit over that situation. And let's face the reality, the punishment he ended up getting was a few games the following season. He didn't lose the World Series, but I know the one thing about Billy Martin, though, and Reggie Jackson found out about this many years later. He don't care how big you are. You don't do it he tells you to do. He's going to let you have it both in the media with the owner. We all know about the ongoing feuds that Martin and Reggie Jackson have. But, you know, it seems like the relationship you had with Billy seemed like it was one of mutual respect, wasn't it?
Well, I respected Billy because he was a winner. First of all, I came through the Yankee organization. Look how many World Series rings he played second base with them, and he was, you know, he was really close to Mantle. He's a kid from Oakland on the streets, and there's only one thing you do is if you're going to go to war, as he would say, you go to win. You don't go in and pussyfoot around. Well, I respect that for almost anybody who really has that kind of faith in their player and themselves.
You also had some other great players on that team. You mentioned Freehan and McAuliffe, but one of the guys who was even a great quiet leader of that '68 team, outfielder Jim Northrup. And the late Jim Northrup, of course, was very colorful, very outspoken. Your thoughts about Jimmy Northrup, who really, I don't feel ever got the recognition he deserved in the baseball annals?
Well, Jim and Billy frequently had discussions that they had opposing views on.
Yeah.
And the Gray Fox, Jimmy, was a talented guy. But, you know, here's the thing. Baseball is a function of 9 people with a defensive position. That's the pitcher. Well, you had Boomer sitting out there was having above average years almost every year in terms of home runs and RBIs. You got an all-star first right fielder in the name of Kaline, who's not, unless he gets hurt, he's not coming out of the lineup. Remarkably, you had a guy that never got very much attention, but was a hell of a player, was Mickey Stanley.
Yeah.
You know? And then you got a couple of people who don't hit too well, but could pick your eyebrows clean. And so that defense was set up such that when Billy's managing to win, he's going to put lineups in there that match up the best to pick up a victory. So I remember as many as 7 left-handed hitters in the lineup, and we still got beat. And he would just go, he said, how can you guys lose? I mean, these guys can't get you out. So there was this, and then you would have, see, Billy, as I said, was a tactician guy. So he'd read these novels by Rommel and the Second World War and things of that nature. And in Oakland during that playoff, I hit a triple. Now, I don't hit many triples. I think I got 6 of them lifetime. Usually somebody steps on their corner, trips. As the case may be. Well, what happened, I hit a line drive into right center field, and Reggie tried to catch it instead of cutting it off, and it went by him, and I ended up third base.
Yeah.
Northrup is in the lineup behind me, and we're down 1 run, and we're, I think, the 7th inning. So we tied the ball game. We got a chance to win this game. So Joe Schultz, we had a set of signals that Joe Schultz pulled on me, and I went, uh-oh. Called a squeeze play.
Oh.
Okay, now remember I told you about surprise elements of Franks and all this stuff that you do in the military.
Yeah.
And of course, body language is the key to signature. Jim Northrup hadn't probably bunted since he was in the 2nd grade. So I'm looking at Jim, and we had a verbal password to tell you that the squeeze play is on. Now, you don't take a guy who doesn't bunt, he's left-handed, and a guy who doesn't run real well. I could run the bases well because I couldn't run fast, but I was a good base runner. nobody in the world is ever going to expect squeeze play.
Yeah.
You got a guy on third base, he's a catcher. We know he doesn't run too good. We got a left-handed hitter who's a power hitter who's never bunted in the big leagues in his life. And he calls, we get this squeeze play called. And I look at Northrup and he went, I mean, just what? I mean, it's one of those, are you kidding me? And so he stepped out of the box and I go back to third base and I look at Schultze and I go, really? He goes, and he gave me the same sign. So when you get two of them, you say, well, I might have been wrong the first time, but certainly not the second. Well,
That's pretty cool.
So what you have is a situation where the pitcher is looking at me. So he comes to the stretch. These guys are all coming out of the stretch. They're not winding up. So he comes to the stretch, pauses, starts. When he starts, I start. And Foxy bunts through the ball. And I'm in rundown.
Oh.
Well, Billy Mays gets in rundowns, but not me.
Yeah.
You know, he can break a rundown. Campy can break a rundown. Brock can break a rundown. Wills can make a break. There are people who break rundowns. Well, I'm not one of them. So we're out of the third out. We're out of the inning. Well, Foxy was not very happy with not having the chance to drive the run in, which is what he wanted to do, which is with his bat. And he and Billy had some words over it about, you took the bat out of my hand. You're a big league ball player. You should be able to bunt anytime I tell you to. That sort of dispassionate discussion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they had a little bit of a
little history there going. Yeah.
They had some history going because Billy was one kind of personality and Jim was a different.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about you doing something that anybody in their right mind would give their right arm to do, Duke, and that's this. You were the last person to hit a home run in original Yankee Stadium in 1973 as a member of the New York Yankees, and yet a loss to the Detroit Tigers. And George and I can tell you right now that we experienced a guy that hit his last home run, Robert Fick, in 1999 when they closed that place down. And you told me that you wish you had stolen home plate. I got to hear that story. That just blows me away.
Well, Thurman, of course, Thurman is going to be the catcher next year. George Steinbrenner and I had developed a relationship in Cleveland because he's from that area. And so when I went on the waiver list, he picked me up and brought me to the Yankees. So, you know, the season's going by. Thurman's playing every day. I'm not. Jerry Moses is on the ball club with us. And so we get to the last game of the year, the last series at home. The Yankees finish at home. And I'm on my way home to get married. And I'm going to be taking the Tiger plane back because my car's parked in the Tiger parking lot.
Oh.
I had gone over that year. I had been sent to the Yankees, and I joined the ball club from Detroit. The Yankees were in Milwaukee. Well, as it turns out, there's a group of us go out to dinner after the Saturday afternoon game. We have a little partying going on, and it gets later and later and later. New York City is notorious for never closing too early.
Yeah.
And so I get home a little bit later because I have got no concerns. The season's over for me as far as I know. Well, the next morning we all get into the clubhouse and I go in and I'm in the locker and the colonel comes out and says, Moses, you, Duke, come here. And so we're standing there and he says, Thurman's gone home. We sent him home. And I look at Jerry. Jerry looks at me, and we're the only two there. See, so somebody's going to catch today. So now neither one of us feel real good because we're both together. Both thinking the same thing, that, well, maybe it won't be a long game, but we can get a nap or two in the bullpen. Well, he said, so one of you are playing. Well, we look at each other, neither one of us says anything. And he said, all right, well, I'm going to flip a coin and you call it, Dirk. So he flips a coin, I call tails, and it's heads. He said, you lose, Duke, you're catching. So that's how I got in the lineup.
A coin flip? Wow.
Interesting.
A coin flip.
A coin flip.
If I'd have called heads, Moses would have caught. So out of a coin flip, a 50-50 deal, and of course, when you play a game, you don't give yourself any considerations as to an impact of any kind of a base hit or a run or anything else. It's part of the deal. You go to the game, you go to the plate, you play the game, you win or lose.
Yeah.
In baseball, it could take you 30 innings, or it could take you 9 innings. And so I hit the home run, not even thinking it's the last game in Yankee Stadium. It's the last at bat for me in Yankee Stadium. And that they're going to shut this thing down and remodel it, and the ball club's going to go play in Shea Stadium next year. Didn't even think about it. And as I told, as I said originally, I said, if I'd have thought about it and planned it, I'd have stolen home plate and I'd have it home. And if somebody wants it, it's worth a lot of money. Well, somebody did get home plate, but it wasn't me, because I was on my way to the shower to catch that bus with the Tigers to get to a car so I could get in my car and drive back to LA.
Unreal.
What a story.
That is a heck of a story, Duke, without a doubt. With that said, okay, let's talk about our Facebook exchange. This was just classic. Okay, I've got to do it, George. First time you're hearing it. So I go on Facebook. I put a post on there that sports is going broke and that Duke disagrees with the protest movement. And he's talking about his baseball pensions. Duke, all right, that's what caught my attention. And that's when I knew I got to have this guy on the sports exchange. And there was nobody else I wanted except George and I and Duke to do this thing. So that's how Duke Sims got on the sports exchange. And just so you know, folks, you are not only listening to the sports exchange, but you're also watching it as well. So and for those of you that want to listen to this broadcast, you can do so through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Duke, let's clarify what you meant, okay, about sports going broke and that you disagree with the protest movement based on your baseball pensions. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, when you get out of baseball and you don't stay in baseball, you start to observe different things. First of all, I admit to being a full-blown Christian. The second part of it is I am also a full-blown conservative. So when I see things that don't match up with me, I'm prone to make posts. And a lot of people disagree with what I post, but that's their problem, not mine. Because when a lot of it is a repost from people who are following me, who are conservatives. And when I get it, I just repost it and send it on. So if you do some research on the Black Lives Matters, you find out there's been billions of dollars raised for them. Maybe the purpose was right at the start, but you find out what the thinking is behind it. And you find out it's a Marxist organization. And then you start to get into it and you delve into Antifa and BLM and you start to look at them real closely. Along comes a dumb policeman who kills a man who is when he was alive, a bad guy. He was he was a criminal, all right? He'd been arrested, put in jail, did all this stuff. Well, as I do it, I'm going, he gets 3 funerals. Who pays for that? Where does that money come from?
Right.
You have one in Minneapolis for him, then you have one of them in Baltimore for him, and then you go to Houston and have another one for him, and you've got the divisiveness of the whole conversation going. and I've said this to many people. When I was playing baseball, we were all Americans. And then I did some research after I got out of baseball when this African American statement came, and I went, wait a minute, where'd that come from? Well, I find out that Jesse Jackson's the one that coined the phrase, got picked up in a paper like it always is. And from then on, people identified themselves by ethnic and race. So we now all of a sudden have an African American, when the day before it was ever coined, it was, I'm an American.
Yeah.
So when as this thing has evolved over time, the big money that advertises has bought into it and supports it. And then all of a sudden, the athletes get together and they're taking a posture on public domain, which means ballparks that are paid for by the public now become a place that they can express their displeasure. I disagree with that. If you really want to do it and you're in the NBA, the NFL, hockey league, I don't care what it is, you need to go provide your efforts with the group outside of that domain. So I made that post about my displeasure with the current athlete, white and black and Latin, who have gotten caught up into this thing. And I said, I won't be watching any of the sports, and I don't. I haven't. I may. And I don't know exactly how I said it, but I made the allusion that, or made the comments about pension plan. And then I came back with, after Scotty made his comment, I came back with another one, and this one was real short, was, oops, I hope they keep playing because my pension plan can be in trouble.
I know. But I saw that. I absolutely.
And so that's how we got this thing started. And then, of course, I was in the business of pensions and finance and all the rest of those things after I got out of baseball later in my life. And I got to thinking, and I told Scotty, I said, that's really not true. I said, the only reason the revenues stop is because they can't sell a ticket. But I said, the TV contracts are in place, the radio and the soft goods, all that's being sold with or without protest or non-protest. You just don't have revenues coming through stadiums. Right. I said, in my case, we're about 83, 84% funded, and my personal receipts are not in jeopardy. But, oops, maybe they ought to play, because the guys that are coming up and are in here now, they're being credited for service time and collection in the far future. And if they don't maintain their funding values, then that thing shrinks down. And I'll be dead, so it doesn't matter. But that's how we got to meet.
Yeah, well, I've always knew what you were like as a ball player. I mean, I followed the sport, my whole life. And then all of a sudden, a post that I shared on my timeline, and that one definitely was a hot one because I got a lot of responses. But yours, I have to tell you, Duke, was the most candid one of the group. And I always, knowing that I thought highly of you as a ball player, then this is a no-brainer. Now look, well, here we are doing this thing, and it's a blast. I'm going to go on to some more baseball questions, and I want to readdress this a little bit more, if I may. All right.
Sure.
So let's talk about some of the best pitchers you caught, and then from there, I want you to talk about Mickey Lolich. But talk about the best ones first, and then we'll lead into Mickey. How's that sound, Duke?
Well, let's give a big shout out to Mickey. He just turned 80 2 days ago, I found out. There's a guy from a friend of ours from Detroit who called me and said, Mickey's, I said, 80 years old. And you go, how the hell did I live this long? One of those kinds of things. And I said, well, he ought to be proud. He got through 8 decades. So I called him and left him a happy birthday message for him. At one time, I was probably as fortunate as anybody in baseball to have caught a pitching staff that had maybe 4 of the best arms that you could, just for pure power. And that was in Cleveland. We didn't score a lot of runs. But we had guys like, we had Sudden Sam McDowell, who nobody wanted to hit off. I mean, it's just one of those things you have to hit off. Sonny Siebert probably on occasion had as good a stuff as anybody in our league. Tion, he wins 20 a couple times. Early on, we had Gary Bell, who had a great arm. You know, you go through those, Steve Hargan of the 60s, and you go through that, and then you, like I said, when I came back to Detroit, having had to hit against guys like Sparma, who were then gone, but Lolich is still there. And as a left-handed hitter, you don't see a lot of left-handed pitchers. And I remember the last day of the season when in 1970, Mickey had, I think, lost 19 games that year. And Alvin Dark put me in a lineup against him, and I hadn't seen a left-hander since spring training. And you know how Detroit gets when it gets gray and overcast in the fall? That's that kind of day. First pitch, Mickey leveled me, separated my hat from my body. Well, there was a discussion, not with Mickey, but Freehand and I had a little discussion at home plate. And so I knew that Mickey was the kind of guy that when he needed to do something would do whatever it was to win. That's what he's all about. And I love catching him because he never shook a pitch off. I don't remember him ever shaking a pitch off. If I felt like it was the right thing to do when I was behind the plate, he just went ahead and threw it. If there was a bad result, then you could say, put it on me. But for the most part, that period of time that I was there from August in 72 to the end of the year when we played in the playoffs, I mean, my God, I don't know. I think maybe he might have lost one ball game, and he carried the club into the 8th inning and before we ever had to go to the ballpark. I mean, to go to the bullpen. So when you have a guy like that on the hill, you really work good with him. And I really enjoyed catching Mickey. And I was telling Scott that the perspective of a breaking ball is different from a hitter than from the catcher behind the plate. I always thought Mickey had this nasty breaking ball. What I found out, it was very small, but it was a very late breaker. So it looked like a fastball. And in essence, that's how hitters see things differently than a catcher. So that he could throw that pitch to a hitter and it looked like it was a big breaking ball, but to a hitter, when you're behind the plate as a catcher, it wasn't that big, but what he could do with it is put it in places where people couldn't hit it. And so that's what made Mickey a really, really good pitcher.
Yeah, he won.
I had him on a broadcast before, and I met him over at his place in southwestern Florida. We had a great time, and I bought a few books and signed them. And for me, I haven't a lot of sports heroes over my years, but when I got to spend time with Mickey at his place, and I knew he was an innings eater, to this day, I'll tell you, Duke, and I believe it in my mind, he should be in the Hall of Fame, but that'll be a debate that a lot of people will have. No way, we won't solve it on this broadcast, let alone any other. But to me, Mickey Lolich, there's a reason why he's on my Facebook profile for sure. So I'm sure every time you look at it, say, yeah, cut this guy. But yeah, there's no doubt. George, you want to add to this?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I looked it up, and Mickey won 22 games that year. Duke, well, you know, he had a good career, but let's face it, he was in the shadow of Denny McClain for many of those years. And then he had that breakout year, remember, Duke and Scott, in 1971? He wins 25 games, but loses the Cy Young to a young man named Vida Blue.
Yeah.
And poor Mickey, in the shadow of Denny McClain. Denny wins 31 and 68, but Mickey was the star of that World Series, as we know, winning 3 games.
Sure.
And then history comes back to haunt him again in 71. Like I said, he goes 25 and 14, but they voted Vida Blue, the Cy Young, instead of Mickey Lolich.
That's hard luck.
Yeah, hard luck. Yep.
Well, you know,
and Vida had a great year too. No,
you guys are you're in the media business, so you're the ones that, if you're the writer, you're the one that does the voting. I I've never understood how all of that works since I was never in the running for the MVP.
So, Duke, aside from the Cleveland pitchers you talked about, Lolich, were there any other of the best pitchers that you ever caught that stood out, or you feel the ones we mentioned are probably the ones that stood out the most?
Well, one of the best, there's a difference between a thrower and a pitcher.
Okay.
Always has been. There's been great arms that were never great pitchers. But one of the headiest pitchers I ever caught who did as good as, and he was a 4-pitch pitcher, but he was not an overpowering pitcher. I mean, his fastball would have been what you would call mediocre at the best, maybe on the high end of mediocre. But that's Don Sutton. And Don Sutton was really a pleasure to catch because he had 4 pitches and he could throw them at any point in the count, at any time, at any place on the strike zone. That's what makes a pitcher so difficult who is not overpowering. Another guy who was very similar to Sutton was Ralph Terry. Ralph Terry was not overpowering by any stretch of the imagination, but he didn't throw the ball in the fat part of the plate. So when you were a hitter, you are working on very narrow parts of the strike zone. And if he stays there and he does it the way good catchers and pitchers work together, you have a real difficult day at the plate. On the other hand, you have really great arms. And I had the fortunate, I never caught anybody from the Houston Astro organization, but certainly they were never, ever out of the hunt for great arms. I mean, you had James Rodney Richards and Wilson and all these guys, and these guys could throw. But and I wasn't there at the highlights of the Dodgers when Drysdale and Koufax were the 2 big guys. But Singer was fun to catch too.
Yeah.
But you get a guy like Jim Brewer, who was out of the bullpen, and Pete Mickelson out of the bullpen. These guys are great pitchers, but they did it a different way. So if you knew how they thought and you could work with them, you could really make people nuts. I mean, they would turn around and cuss you. John Hiller is one of my favorite relievers of all time.
Oh, great guy.
And a super guy. And he never, he's another one, never shook off a pitch. You call it, I'll throw it. You tell me where you want it and I'll get it as close to it as I can. And I remember we playing Baltimore. Paul Blair's at the plate. We got the bases loaded. And this is the first year he won the the Fireman of the Year award. He comes out of the bullpen and he is humming. He's got, a little short arm of his, and that ball's jumping. And Blair is cheating and fouling and tipping and doing all the rest of that. And I called a changeup. And John never blinked an eye. He went into the windup, threw it, bounced it about 8 feet in front of home plate, screwed Paul Blair into the ground like a corkscrew. Strike 3. Walked off the hill, never said a word. He bounced it. I caught it on one hop right in front of my mask. And Blair when Blair was going through the swing, he's going, no! So those are the kinds of things that stick out in your mind.
Yeah.
And Brewer was a screwball pitcher who didn't want to throw the screwball to a right-handed hitter.
Yeah.
I mean, to a left-handed hitter. And I finally convinced him that was a pitch that he needed to throw. In 71, when I went over there, I said, Jim, I'm a left-handed hitter. Let me tell you what that ball that does this, when you're looking for it to do this, I said, that's a pitch at your waist. I mean, you don't want to do it. I said, you'll break some bats. And when people find out you can break their bat, it gives you a big edge on the hill.
Yeah.
All right, so we go from great pitchers to a great broadcaster. His name is Ernie Harwell. Duke, have you ever heard of him? I know George and I were really close to Ernie. Ernie to me is one of the greatest people I've ever been associated with. And then, obviously had a brief opportunity to work with him, let alone during the fact that you were working with them during some important baseball, AKA 1972. Boy, we can't forget about bringing that up again. What was Ernie Harwell like? Give me a great Ernie Harwell story or two, Duke.
Well, I don't really, I don't, I was not on the radio a lot on interviews and televisions. And so my recollection of Ernie was that he was like the consummate, he was like the Vince Scully's. There was a group of about 10 to 15 old broadcasters that Ernie set right in the middle of it. Barber and all these guys. That's the kind of broadcaster he was. When you're on the field, you never hear him, obviously. And so unless you're interviewed a lot by him or in a social environment with him, you really don't know him. What I do know about Ernie was he's one of the most gracious guys that I had ever run across. He never had a bad word to say about anybody. When he broadcast, if you were like, I got thrown out of a game, I think, and I was in the clubhouse listening to him, he never took exception to a play that would embarrass the player. However he couched his phraseology and how he did his things, you could never walk off the field and say, I hate that broadcaster, because he just didn't do it that way.
Right.
That whole group the whole group, Kel and Ernie, those guys were really, really a great team to broadcast for the Tigers. And they could paint pictures. See, the old broadcasters painted pictures. So if you were on the radio, you it's almost like you're sitting right behind home plate or behind first base, or you were in the middle of the infield. That's how good they were. And Ernie was right there. He was a magician about that.
He was. And nowadays, you know what, Duke and Scott, they talk too much. They talk too much. They got to analyze every pitch. Oh, was that a split seam, fastball? Was that that ball dropped? And, these guys nowadays, they don't tell those stories, Duke and Scott. They don't. They don't weave that picture. Maybe today's society, the young people don't want to hear that. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I miss that kind of stuff like you described, Duke.
Well, I mean, I grew up in a small town in Idaho, and there was a fellow by the name of Joe Cullinane who eventually moved on up to AAA ball, but he never got a big league shot. But he was in the day of the radio when you took the bat and went, and there was a baseman, there was a long fly ball. I mean, you sit there listening to this thing, and you swear this guy's going to run right through the wall. Well, then then the transistor radio comes along. I'll never forget this. And the same guy's got the transistor radio. You're listening to the radio, and he's now describing this game. And you find out that it was a pop-up, and the shortstop backed up about 8 feet. Caught the ball, threw it. But if you were at home listening to that game, this was a critical high fly ball. He made a great catch. Wow, I wish I'd have been there to see it. That's Ernie.
Well, let me tell you, Duke, I've had a lot of young guys on recent broadcasts and never heard of a transistor radio, so all of us can relate to it. So,
but you guys can. Young
people,
yeah. But they got the internet now. They can go on Google and type in transistor radio, and it'll tell them all they need to know.
Yeah, but meanwhile, nobody understands except the three of us and many others that you stuck that thing underneath your pillow. You got to listen to it when mom and dad didn't know about it. And I can tell you many times where I would listen to it, and there were times I would listen to a West Coast hockey game with the Red Wings and the Kings, and there were times I'd wake up in the middle of the night, didn't know what I had to write on for creative writing, and then I wrote it because it popped up in the middle of the night after taking 6 days to figure it out. Anyways, that's my transition. So now let's talk about a very unique story, Duke, and that's this. You hit 100 home runs exactly, and you actually have the current record for a player hailing from Utah. This is pretty interesting.
Wow. Yeah, that's my mother used to take exception to that because back in the day when they'd had the game of the week, if you happened to show up on it and you got to play in it, they would always make that announcement, and from Salt Lake City, Utah, left-handed hitter, Dwayne Duke Sims. Okay. Now she's watching it on TV, and she's sitting in Pocatello, Idaho. And the story really is, I was born in Salt Lake City. At age 6 weeks, my parents moved to a little small town called Twin Falls. And then a year and a half later, I guess they moved to Pocatello, and that's where I was actually raised. So from real timing, you're talking about 6 weeks in Utah and the rest of your life raised up in Idaho. So the story goes like this. In 1955, I got to play in Fayette, Idaho in a semi-pro team. My brother was playing third base and I was in the outfield. So there was a young man who had signed in 1954 by the name of Harmon Killebrew. And they gave him a pile of money.
Jeez.
And he goes to Washington, D.C., and he sits on the bench. And along about 57, 58, 59, they start to play him, and all of a sudden he becomes the strong man from Idaho. So after both of our careers, and Harmon and I know each other from playing against each other, but the persons who were really close to Harmon were good friends, and I lived in their house with my brother when I worked up there playing semi-pro ball. So I came up with this thing one day, and I said to Harmon, I said, you and I are both famous. And he said, what? I said, yeah. I said, you're going to go to the Hall of Fame, and I'm from the same state. That makes us both famous. And I came up with this little trivia question for you guys. And it goes something like this. Harmon Killebrew is from a little town of Fayette, Idaho. Played for the Washington Senators, Minnesota Twins. And he hit 566 home runs, I believe it is. Can you name the two guys from Idaho that hit 666 home runs? And everybody goes, well, we know Harmon hit 566. And I said, yeah, I got the rest of them.
That's funny. That is funny.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That is really good. I like that.
Oh,
Yeah. So if you want to know how many home runs I hit, you have to have a capability of doing math.
Wow. I'll leave the math thing to my father-in-law, Fred Ebling, who'll be listening to this broadcast, and he's out in the Milwaukee area. So other than that, I could sit here and tell you math stories where, you know what, I did just enough to get through junior college to get through it, and I was more of a liberal arts guy. Everybody knows if you're involved with liberal arts, you're not great at math, and vice versa. For another day. All right, now, Duke, I'm going to give you some rapid fire type of things, and I'll bring up names and situations and tell me what your thoughts about them. We talked about Colin Kaepernick. How do you want to go ahead and talk about Colin Kaepernick? He started a lot of this silent protest, and he's certainly not quiet these days, let alone a few years. So what are your thoughts about Colin Kaepernick?
Well, I think he's ungrateful, number one. I never understood an individual who would be adopted and given every opportunity in this great country to become what you are with any choices you have.
Right.
To take exception to what your parents gave to you so that you end up with this thing. And what I don't understand is, and I know he's from he's right here. He went to school at the University of Nevada, Reno. What do you want? Oh, this is my flight attendant person. And I'm flying first class, so I got me another one.
There you go.
No charge.
All right.
So, Colin, I don't know the kid. One day he's a guy who has this exceptional arm and takes club to the Super Bowl, and everybody thinks he's one of the great kids in the world. I do know that he met a Muslim girl and married her, and I think that's a great deal of influence on him, and how her influence and that attitude of what the Muslims are has to have a great deal of effect on him. And now he is the spokesman for maybe the genesis of, or the part that puts the deal together for the athlete. I mean, even to the point where it is so wrong for the guys who are playing the game to tell ownership who've got their skin in the game by owning and paying big money that you better give him a job. That is unheard of in any business I've ever heard of. And to me, it's criminal to stand up and say to the guy who is paying you, in Colin's case, not, but to be paid, turn around and say, you have to give him a job. Well, it was quite evident that the last 2 years of his career, he couldn't play. And that's why he benched him. Now, if you can play, you should be able to negotiate that for yourself. What I'm disappointed with, though, is a company like Nike, who gives him a boatload of money to champion this thing. And to me, I disagree with it. I've played in tournaments where Nike was a major sponsor, you know, golf tournaments. I'm a terrible golfer, but because I was something at some point in life ago, I got invited. And wonderful gear, shoes, and all kinds of stuff. I won't buy anything from them again. I mean, that's just how I feel. Why would I support something I'm diametrically opposed to? Right. It doesn't make sense. The common sense of America seems to me left someplace. And I don't know where it went. And maybe it's just because I'm almost 80.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's talk about a comment you made to me that you say American voters are dumb as a rock.
Well, I believe that because when I was in high school, I had to take 2 years of civics and political science. It was a requirement, and history. So we had to take that. The curricula has changed so much now that if you ask people on the street that are young to say anything about the Constitution, the independence, how do you do it? People who are 20 years old can't tell you the difference between the Civil War and the Revolutionary War by name. So it bothers me that we've allowed, and I told Scotty this, I said, you know, the way the Constitution is written, if you look at it as a dog, we're the dog, we're the people. We're the dog, and the government is the tail.
Right.
Well, that has been changed to where we're the tail and they're the dog. And I don't know how you change it. Usually it can only be changed, as far as I'm concerned, in education. And we have now the far left has infiltrated the great universities and high schools, even junior high, in indoctrinating principles that are categorically against everything I believe. Now, I don't have children in school anymore. My daughter's 46 years old, or 45, I guess. She lives in Boston. Actually, she lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they call it, back there, they call it the Republic of Cambridge, that'll tell you. And in that town, there are 4 major universities that are so far left in their educational structure. And so we have our talks, but she doesn't like some of the thoughts that I have, and she knows. So we have to avoid really getting in the nuts and bolts. Otherwise, we'll fracture my family, and that's not something that I'm willing to do, because at my age, I could be dead tomorrow.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so you mentioned to me that you said that Donald Trump is unhandleable. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Unmanageable. See, I believe that I have friends of mine that are deep Christians who just can't stand Trump. And I said, you know, the good book teaches us that if a person changes, we should accept the change and forgive.
Right.
And they can't get over it. So here's my assessment of Trump. I love him, but I've lived in New York, and I've lived in New York City, and I know how New Yorkers are. New Yorkers are unlike anybody in this country. They have their own drum, their own beat, their own way. And it's not unusual to have somebody have a heart attack fall on the sidewalk and people step right over them, keep going, don't even try to help them. So Trump is from that kind of society.
Okay.
Now, when he makes up his mind to do something or try to get it done, and people take the opposite side of it, and for example, the globalists, the big money, the oligarchs of the world, they don't like what he wants to do with our country, which is make it strong and independent of everybody else. So they don't like that. So they're going to do everything in the world to be able to maneuver him by getting him out or making him unelectable, because they can't control him. He doesn't need them.
Right.
He doesn't want them. He knows them. And he knows who they are because he's been given money to the people that they support. And he sees, and I remember seeing him when I lived back east. And he made a comment, and they said, "Are you ever going to run for president?" He said, not until I believe the country needs it. He said, "I got too many good things going in my life." I remember that. It was on New York television station.
Right.
And so now here's a man who people dislike, or maybe even use the word hate, not because of substance or what he gets done,
Right.
because they don't like his style.
Right.
And to me, and that may come from my athletic background,
Mm-hmm.
you look at results before you throw the cat out with the bathwater.
See,
And
I tend to think that unmanageable or unhandleable are both good terms. And here's what I mean by that, Duke. Okay. Number one, he obviously is active on social media with Twitter and Facebook. So unlike any other president out there where he had the State of the Union address, he's just using a different means to communicate his message. So I think both those terms go hand in hand, whether it's unmanageable or unhandleable, because let's just face it, he's a rocket is what he is. And, being the president of the United States, he has the platforms for which he can do so. So I think you were pretty much on target, which is why I'm glad that, most cases I don't talk about these things. But considering the way we were talking about it ahead of time, Duke, I think it's really neat that you're able to talk about it in a sense in both contexts. You follow where I'm coming from? And
Sure.
I think you're pretty accurate with it, so I have no objection to it at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at results of what happened after, and of course, anytime you want something spun, somebody can spin it.
Right.
I mean, it's just that simple. But he's got the bully pulpit. The big money is in Biden's pocket. But if you're looking at an election, and I will say this right here, and I hope everybody hears it, when you vote this year for those people who vote, you're not voting for the president against Trump. You're voting for the vice president against Trump. Because I don't believe Biden's going to last 2 years. And that means the second person goes into that office. And this is the most liberal, nasty woman they could put on the ticket other than Hillary. And she might even be worse than Hillary, because Hillary is a game player. So when I say people don't like substance, it's not, they want results, but they don't like the style that gets the results.
Interesting. Okay. All right. You told me that this is the first NFL opening day that you missed. You don't watch the NBA, and you won't ever, and you don't watch MLB anymore. Again, please elaborate on that, Duke.
Well, with the MLB, and maybe there was a reason they had to do it because of the shortened season, but these, and I don't even know what all the rule changes are. It takes a real fan to know what they're doing. But when you take a game that has a construct of history,
right,
and you change rules, so how do you start to measure? And baseball is one of the great trivia games in the world. People talk about the old, the new, the middle, all the rest of it. So who came up with the notion that you needed to put a guy at second base in an extra inning ball game? I mean, that's what we used to do in the 6th grade.
right. Well, they say this is a 1-year thing, so
Yeah,
because they're
but
trying to
it's
protect
a
the
one-year
players.
thing, but if they think it will attract more fans or whatever it is, the purpose of it, they'll keep it. I mean, it's almost like the federal government or the state government or the city government. You put a rule in place, it never comes out.
Right.
It's just that simple. So the game has changed. Uh, if you're a manager and you're making $1 million a year and you got a bench that's sitting over making $200 million a year and they don't want to do what you want to do, how do you manage that?
Right.
Like
Oh,
I told you, my friend Bob Bailey, God rest his soul, he passed away a couple of years ago.
yeah.
He said, "You know how you manage in the big leagues?" I said, "No." He said, "You put your right foot up on this top step, you put your elbow on the knee, you put your hand on your chin, and look concerned, because the guy that's running it is your bench coach. He's
Right.
3 innings out, and he's going to tell you the decision that you need to make in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning if it's that late in the game."
Well, I give you that. Number one, first of all, the universal designated hitter, I have a feeling he'll be here to stay. That's a matter of time. But then the 3 hitter minimum, although for some reason that doesn't bother me as much, because when you played, it was common to go 1 or 2 innings. So I could probably live with that a little more compared to some of the other changes. In the 7 inning doubleheaders, again, COVID-19 year 2020 is a little different than normal.
Yeah.
But I guess your point here, Duke, is you don't want to mess with the purity of a game that has so much tradition and history going for it. And like all of us, we can appreciate where the game was versus some of the new things, pace of play and all that. A lot of it's a bunch of baloney to me anyways.
Here's how I view the game now. When I first came to the big leagues, or when I first signed, 1959, when's that? A couple hundred years ago, I guess. I don't know. Guys got paid as pitchers. They got paid on complete games and innings pitched. I mean, that was a big part of their payroll.
Okay.
So you want to take them out of a ball game, you're messing with their paycheck for the next year, because what you do today is what you get paid on for next year.
Right.
Now the game has been changed where along about Sparky Anderson's time, or a little bit before, and Sparky was a good user of it, you started to see how the bullpens became more and more dominant.
Right.
Okay. So I sat down one day and we were talking with a bunch of writers and things, and they said, well, 4-man rotation. I said, nah, that's not really true. I said, we had Mondays, we played a doubleheader on Sunday, we had Mondays off, and Thursday was a travel date. So oftentimes we were really playing 7 games or 6 games in 7 days. And I said, when you look at it from that perspective, you get a 4-man rotation. The doubleheader is where your spot starter comes in. So you're really in a 5-day guy. And I said, somebody's going to do it. But if I were in baseball right now as a GM, I'd bring my manager in and say, here's what we're going to do. I want you to get me the 14 best. I'm going to get you the 14 best arms in baseball, and I'm going to put them in your bullpen. I'm going to put them in your pitching staff. And everybody's going to run 3 innings and come out, 3 innings, come out, 3 innings and come out. And we have a compensation plan that will work in that. That's not like any measurement you've ever had. And if you look at it, you will have a fresh arm every 6th day. Every day. Every day you got a fresh set of arms. 3, 3, and 3, 3, 3, and 3, 3, 3, and 3. So you've used 9 arms in a 3-game set. What do you got left? I got 5 more. Guess what? Do you know how hard it is to hit? And guys will tell you this. That played in the old days. The young guys maybe not so much. But you know how hard it is to hit a fresh arm every time you go to the plate?
Wow.
And do you know how hard it is to manage when you want to set your lineup up with right-handed, right-handed, left-handed, right-handed, left-handed, and you're looking at 14 arms over there that he's running this at you, and you're going, God, I got left-handers coming in against left-handers and right-handers coming in against right-handers. How do I manage that? You change the whole dynamic of the game, And then you change all the measurements of the game, and you can put a compensation package where the manager can walk in and say, 14 guys, do not worry about how many games you win or lose. We have something that's going to pay you for 3 innings every time you go out there.
So, Duke, would you say your disdain, as I can use the word right now, is due to a lot of the rule changes and all that? Because with the NBA, you were adamant you would never watch it, and I have a feeling why I know, because they're the loudest ones in this movement. You know, and obviously this is a delicate subject, but me, I've been turned off by the NBA. I call it the National Drama League. Unlike the time when I used to cover it, you know, with the Pistons and the Bad Boys, where I love good old-fashioned hard-nosed basketball. Now we're playing patty cake, baker's man, instead of the NDL, the National Drama League. Remember, Duke, the National Drama League. Anytime you think of the NBA, you heard it here. But,
well,
you know.
Here's what I think about the NBA personally. I played basketball in high school. I was a 6'2" center. Okay, big deal. I played against a 6'7" center in a scrimmage game. He ate my lunch. I believe if you want to make that game the way it was designed to be, you take the basket from 10 feet and you make it 12 feet. You got guards that are 6'7". You got power forwards 6'11". You got these guys that can jump up and take a quarter off the back of the backboard. So this cast and go from 25, 30, 35 feet out, 2 steps in, fired up. Make that game so that you have to do something other than cast away. These guys are deadly from out there.
Right.
And that's where they play it. So I guess it's like, do you know the bad angle right now to hit the most home runs? I guess people like to watch the 3-point play.
Right.
Well, put a double 3-point play in. If you got 3 points here, put another line on it and give them 4. Pretty soon, give them 5 at half court. I mean, the game that I grew up with, like all games, they have an evolving change. And to me, it's I watch college basketball because they run, they work, they're trying to get to that level, and they work really, really hard at playing the game. And their coaches have some discipline on them because they aren't getting paid yet.
Okay, so you're telling me right now that part of the reason you don't want to watch the NBA is mainly because of the style of play, not taking it to the other Black Lives Matter, which we're going to get to in a moment.
No, both. I mean, both. Okay. The NBA owns China. China controls the NBA. They don't want to make China mad. Okay. Well, I don't care about China. I care about the U.S. So if you're in love with China, then I don't need you. And I don't need to watch you, and I don't need to support you.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so when you talk about the Black Lives Matter, I know we talked about it before, and you talked about who these people's with the Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Can you go over that a little bit more, please? And this will be a good educating moment for those that are listening.
Well, it's always been my understanding that if you really want to get into masses of people, you need to find the money and follow it. So when you have an outright Marxist organization that even admits to being Marxist and you support it, then you have now put yourself contrary. You're a contrarian to the United States of America because we're not Marxists. Okay, we have social democracy here because we've had it since 1929, 30, when FDR took it in. So this name social democrat is already here. We have people like me on Social Security. We have people who work. We have people who have social networks. We have all of that. To go into the Marxist side is into a power struggle between 2 forms of government. And I prefer the one that I grew up in and live in. And that other one is not anything that I want any part of, and nor should any American, including the athlete. The athletes are the one percenters. I mean, my God.
Okay, you say we had the NFL opening weekend, and you say you never missed it. Why did you not want to be a part of it this weekend?
Well, I was always brought up as we have a national anthem.
Yeah.
But we don't have a black national anthem until this year because of Black Lives Matter. So why do we have two national anthems? Why do I have to be subjected to something that I don't agree with? Got a Marxist organization that the NFL caved into, and they allow them because, well, for whatever reason, and I think it's if I look at it from a Christian point of view, it is God is left and mammon and money has taken over. So I need the athlete to make my money, but I'm on the hook for it, so I'll go along with them. When Jesse Jackson coined the phrase African American, he set the tone for what's happening today.
Okay. All right. So when you talk about sport in general, okay, you mentioned this to me before. Okay, the whole deal in sport is what gives them the right to use stadiums for protest nonsense, using public facilities paid for by tax dollars, when they should do this on the street. I thought that there was a very strong statement, but I have to tell you, when you brought that up to me, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that there's other places other than stadiums to do that.
No, I guess Jerry Jones is the only one in the NFL that owns a stadium, and he has the right to do it his way. But the rest of them, the ballparks, do you know a baseball team other than Fenway that's owned by, and Wrigley that's owned by the franchise?
No,
Dodgers. I think there's 3. The rest of them are all tax bonded.
Right.
So if you're going to go out and you want to do your social justice protests, then go out and do it on your time, not the fans' time.
Fair enough.
Okay. Otherwise, I mean, I know people right now may never come back.
Yeah, the ratings,
Huh?
ratings, a lot of the ratings are down. Every sport, the ratings are down, the TV ratings.
Yeah, and here's the deal. I have a friend of mine that used to sell or used to buy time for sport, on TV and radio.
Sure.
And he said, when these contracts, if this stays the way it is, he just said this to me the other day at lunch. He said, if these contracts stay the same way they are now and the fans pull back, he said, when these guys go to negotiate those big contracts for the 5-year period,
yeah,
the buyer now becomes the one who has the money, not the product. And he said they're going to be a big wake-up call for the athletes who are now 16 years old, and 8 years from now they want to be in that game. And what happened to the money? Well, same thing that they used to tell us. We only got so much coming in. We can only give so much out.
Yeah, for those NBA players that are looking for max contracts, take the money while you can get it. Now, you talked about golf being a sport that you have a tremendous amount of respect for, and you mentioned it in the form of an independent contractor. I thought that was a great, that was a good characterization of it. Go ahead and explain what you mean, Duke.
Well, here's the deal about golf. It's you against the golf course, not against another person or another team. We do have the President's Cup, we do have the Ryder Cup, but that's a different issue. But if you're a person who wants to be a golfer and you work to have your skill sets so that you can play that game on tour, you have sponsors that give you these little patches, okay? But you also employ people. You have sports psychologist, you pay him. You got a teacher who looks at your swing. He does everything for you. And then you have to go out and execute that or you go broke. So you won't find them on their knee or disavowing anything, because what they get paid on is performance. And if they don't perform, they don't make very much money and they get out of the game. They go someplace else to do their trade. They might be club pro or whatever. So I look at it, I play the game, I know how difficult that game is, and I watch them and I just wonder. It's a wonderment to me, and yet I look at them and I say, they are independent businessmen who are working their butts off to make money to support a group of people without any interference. And I love it. So I watch it. I watch it.
Oh, has a great history behind it as well. All right, so let's go back to kneeling for the national anthem. You say you've never walked in the shoes of a black man and then a white man. Why don't you go ahead and explain to our listeners and viewers what you meant by that?
Well, I'm sure that everybody that I know, and maybe most of your listeners, have always heard the axiom, you've never walked in the shoes of a black man because I'm white, right?
Right.
Well, I'm sure you've heard it. It's been said millennial times, thousands of times, interviews. You don't know what it's like to be black. Well, Mike, I got to thinking about that, and I said, they don't know what it's like to be white. I mean, I've got I can talk about discrimination on the black side. For example, how many white guys are playing in the NFL?
Right.
It's about a 78-22. That's kind of discriminatory, isn't it?
Yeah.
Under the Equal Rights Law. How about let's go to the NBA?
Right.
Now we're sitting on about 90-10.
Right.
If we go into Major League Baseball, well, they've been on Major League Baseball for the last 15 years to get more black guys into the game because the Latins are taking over. Isn't that a little discriminatory?
Yeah.
Now, let's get to hockey. How many black guys we got in hockey? 12? 10?
Right. Not
A lot more than we used to.
Yeah. So this notion of privilege gets distorted if it fits an individual's narrative. It's that simple. So, hell, I'm 80 years old. I ought to be able to see the NBA and play. How far do you think that would get? Nah, forget it. You can't play with them. Well, you're right. I can't. So this notion of how we couch things in language really disturbs me.
Would you say the one thing about baseball that a lot of people, even though it doesn't have the pace of an NBA or the NHL, it's the ultimate chess match? That's what I love about baseball. Anybody that understands a game of chess, when you call it a chess match, within, you got the managers, the hitters, and all the analytics. I mean, let's face the reality. Guys like Michael Jordan were great athletes, struggled with it. And, but there's no knock against Michael Jordan. I'm sure there's a lot of guys that, the mental part of it will wear any. But I think of all the sports, baseball is the ultimate chess match. You being a guy, I can appreciate that.
Baseball is unique in the fact that you have 9 guys competing against 9 guys with individual performances.
Right.
So if you look at the broadness of it, you have the same guy who has to swing a bat also has to go out and field the ball.
Right. Right.
So when you get to look at that, for example, everybody on the infield and the outfield is looking in and the catcher's looking out. Now today, everything's done by metrics. And guess what? Catcher doesn't call a pitch. He looks at the bench because they've got a algorithm over there that says this is how you pitch this guy, and you put it down. Now, unless you're one of the top established 25 pitchers in both leagues, you don't go shaking your head off, not unless you're told to shake your head off. Catcher has no responsibility on the defensive side except to catch the ball. And I watch him on defense behind the plate, and I see several things that I would have, and watched the game and having played the game, I see catching managers not doing anything about it because I think they're told, don't do it.
Right.
Because you don't want to, this guy swings a bat too good, and I don't want you to make him feel bad. You might hurt his feelings. So, that's how I feel about that kind of thing. That's what makes baseball as a team sport unique.
Yeah, when you talk about baseball today, you really nailed that one, Duke. You were talking about analytics and all that sort of thing. And I think you can only go so far with analytics, but you can't take away the human element, no matter what they're trying to do to it. Analytics and numbers get you so far, but you can't measure the heart of how a guy runs to first base and what he's thinking about. The human element, to me, will always be a significant part of baseball. I don't care about analytics. I do to a certain extent, but I'm not a real big analytics guy. And a lot of managers these days are brought in because of their analytics instead of a lot of the old school guys.
I think the game has got into the analytics because of the success of low payroll and high success of the Oakland Athletics. I mean, that's where it started. They took a bunch of, well, they were good players. They just didn't have great successes at other organizations. They came in and they put this thing together, and all of a sudden they win something. And what did they win? 21 out of 22 games to win the pennant or the division that one year? And a guy who had never hit 15 home runs in his life hits 30? I mean, you go, there must be something to that. So everybody, if it worked for them, it must work for us. But in the meantime, you had a whole gang of scouts in that Oakland organization are going, wait a minute. The 1 through 5 measurements, what is that? We don't care about that, and they left,
Yeah.
So nobody knows what's inside a man's heart.
Right.
Just don't know that. And but the analytics will put it in, and so that the heart doesn't matter.
So is a game of baseball watchable these days? I know what it was like during the good old days, but right now you kind of wonder because you have the younger generation and the old school guys like us are trying to hang on there for what we know. But the question is with the game of baseball today, is it watchable or do we really miss a lot of what used to be?
Well, first of all, I think one of the most exciting plays in baseball is the hit and run.
Okay.
When's the last time you saw one?
Not very often.
Because there's so many things happen by putting people into action and move. When a runner runs and you hit behind him or you hit it, you either eliminate a double play or the guy goes first to third, or it gets a base hit and hits a double and run scores. I don't see any, like I say, I don't see those kinds of things. How about the bunt and run?
Right.
No.
Never see a bunt and run. If you said to somebody who's a high school coach now, you ever do a bunt and run and go, what's that? They don't know. Game has changed that much. In some respects, you get high activity because of the home run. But then you get into a thing right now where they find out that there's some cheating going on and the great hitters are not so great. Now, what do you do about that? So the game, the athletes, they're big. They are big, strong kids, and they've learned how to play the game a different way than you and I grew up watching it or playing it, And like I say, I watch catchers. When I do watch a game, if the camera will stay on the catcher, I can start to pick why he has problems doing what he's doing, throwing people out, or catching a ball that looks like a strike that bounces and goes by. The World Series is good examples. There were several balls that should have been caught in the air that went into the dirt. The one thing the catchers do really, really well, they trap the ball by dropping down in front of them. Their right and left range is limited because they have the way they set up changes the ability to go right and left. They don't. So they become first baseman. They reach for it. So there's a lot of things in the game that have changed so much. And I've been out of the game since 1974.
Right.
What's that? 46 years?
So let's talk about the big league manager today and before. Obviously, it's a much different job description than it was before. I would think that's a pretty good way to assess it, wouldn't it be, Duke?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I knew Ray Boone. Ray Boone was a great guy. Your friend from the Detroit Tigers. Got 3 kids that are great kids and good players.
Even Scott's not that old.
Huh?
Scott's not that old to know Ray Boone. Neither am I.
Well, I am, because he was a friend of mine while he was alive. But Ray Boone had some great years, and his kids. And
Yes.
Bob
Yep.
and his 2 boys.
Aaron.
I've always felt, don't know, but it's a feel.
Right.
The manager, when I played, was the king in the clubhouse. I don't think that's it now. I think the manager is the interface between ownership and the press.
Well, that's true.
So if you can handle the press and make them like your owner, you're valuable. But if you are the guy who handles the players and pisses them off, you're not valuable to anybody. I mean, Billy pissed guys off, but I never went to I never once went upstairs to talk to the GM about the manager. Not once. I was afraid if I went back down and he found out I did, that ain't a good deal. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've had some discussions with guys that managed a long time in the minor leagues, and when you're managing people that make a lot more money than you do, that have access to the same person that you do. So the coverage is not the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just a personal feeling. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I've never been there. And I'm not in the game. I haven't been in the game since 1986. So, and that was only for 1 year.
So, Duke, I love the fact that we both have different stories how we became a catcher. So I'm going to let we'll use a nice baseball term, lead off with your story, how you became a catcher. And then I'd kind of like to throw mine out there as well. But
I think you should go first.
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay, I'll do that.
Because my story's better and I don't want you to upsleep me.
It's good stuff. All right, well, I'll go first. I'll follow the guy who's named Duke, who once upon a time, I was named Duke many years ago by family members until I graduated to Scoop, Motor City, Mad Mouth, and all that business. But anyways, I became a catcher when I was playing minor league ball. No, not the regular minor leagues here called professional, but the real young guys playing for a team called the Wildcats in Southfield, Michigan. And anyways, we had a couple of catchers who did not show up, and my dad happened to be the manager at the time. Now, I got to tell you, I was a little animated as a kid. Not that you guys couldn't figure it out anyways. I was talking to this little 57-year-old kid, but I got a little animated and wanted to do it. And you know what? I'll tell you what. When I got the job, I never gave it back. And I loved catching between innings, warming up the pitchers, taking a beating in the back of the head. I certainly knew where it got painful in certain unspecified areas, but I enjoyed it. But I think the main thing is I was such a horrible position player where I didn't have the concentration levels in the outfield. I had a good arm in the infield, but the problem was I would pull my first baseman off the bag. So how do you go ahead and channel a guy like me? Stick him behind the dish, for God's sakes, okay? That way that throw I had to go back to the pitcher was a nice thing called a straight line, which if we were to take it in golf terms, give me my big Bertha and hit that thing straight as much on the minial, but I didn't need a big Bertha, just a little cannon for an arm as a kid. So, my concentration levels were what they were. My dad liked my energy. And I got to tell you, my dad put me in a position where, he's pretty good at this. Now I have a place to put him in the lineup, and I'll stick everybody else wherever they need. The moral of the story was the other guys that wanted their job back, one of them quit. The other one was my backup. And, the only regret I ever had was I didn't catch it. I started catching late in the game, but that was an ideal position for a guy, where if, let's face it, when you're a catcher, Duke, your head has to be in the game the whole time. There's no, if your head's not in the game, it's going to get painful. And, I had my bell rung a couple of times and caught a foul ball with my mask on. When somebody told me to go out there and take it off, I would never catch another foul ball back. But who knows? But that's how I became a catcher, because my other guys didn't show up. My dad found a position, and I didn't be good at it. Horrible hitter, though. All right, go ahead, Duke.
Well, mine's a little different. But and again, one of those kinds of stories about overcoming adversity. In 1947, I think the Little League was founded. And by 1950, I think about that time, it showed up in my hometown. And they had tryouts. So my town was only 12, 15,000 people. So every kid in America, in my place, all came out to try out. And my brother was a third baseman. He's 8 years older than I am. So I guess I was maybe, I'm 11. And he's a senior in high school. So I want to be a third baseman. So he's my guy. And I loved him dearly, and God bless him. He was the best man I've ever known. At any rate, I ended up going out and trying out at third base. And I start, stumble, and fall, so to speak, and they pick all the teams, and I'm not on a team but they had what they call these ancillary things that you could be part of, but not an active part of. Right. So about a week later, they had in my hometown was the St. Louis Cardinal farm team in the Pioneer League. So they put the Little League fields up, and they put the 4 teams together to raise money for the Little League program. And so the manager, or the coach of the team, they call him, 2 teams on each side. His son was the catcher, little guy. He's like 9 years old. And I was, stocky. And he catches the first inning, and he can't catch the ball. Balls are flying by him, and he's ducking and doing all kinds of strange things. So he made a statement when the coach came in. He said, "Can anybody catch?" And I said, "Well, I can catch. I can catch the ball." So he said, "Well, you go catch the next inning." Well, as it turns out, our 2 teams win the ball game. I hit 2 home runs, drive in 5 runs. And the next day, my coach brings me a uniform. So now I'm an official member of the Coca-Cola team. That's how I got to be. That's how I got to be a catcher. Now I caught Little League, Pony League, but when I went to high school, I became a first baseman and outfielder. Interesting. And as a freshman, I led the club in everything.
Interesting.
So, hey, Duke, you were telling me that you manage in the Chicago White Sox organization, and that Ken Harrelson, the Hawk. Tell me about that story about with Ken Harrelson and Hawk and your brief tenure as a manager in the White Sox organization.
Kenny and I are good friends. He and I were teammates in Cleveland, and I played against him in the Eastern League. And he was working in the broadcast booth in Chicago, and I guess he and Reinsdorf have a really, really good relationship, probably still do. Asked him to take over the operations, become the executive vice president of baseball operations for the White Sox. And Harrelson always had a philosophy when he was playing that in the minor leagues, if you're trying to get kids to be the big leagues, you should have them trained and taught what big league baseball is, so that they had an idea as they moved through the system that they were being trained the same way all the way up. So when they got to the big leagues, the guys below them were doing the same things that the manager wanted to have when he received him at the big league level. Now we know that the odds the odds are very, very small to go through the minor league system and get to the big leagues. So anyway, Kenny decided to hire all ex-big league ball players.
Okay.
And I got a phone call one day from him. He said, do you want to come back into baseball? And I was 45, I guess, 46. I'd been out of the game 10, 11 years. I said, yeah, I really would. He said, what do you want to do? I said, well, I've always felt like if I had a chance to manage on the field, that I could go back to the big leagues as a big league manager. And he said, that's what I'm looking for. So I took the job and went to spring training with the White Sox and ended up with a team in Appleton, Wisconsin. And as Kenny was prone to do, he was moving people around. And Tom Haller came out of the AAA club and went to the front office to work for Ken. And that moved everybody up, and I ended up in the Carolina League. So that's how I got there. And Alvin Dark, who had been my manager for 3 years, and Alvin and Ken were really, really close from all the years in Kansas City. So that's how I got back into the game. Ultimately, Ken fired Tony La Russa. Okay. And Tony La Russa was really popular in Chicago because in 1984, he had won the division and almost went to the World Series, but he always had a club that was always in the hunt. So he fired La Russa, and that put Kenny into less than favored nations, not with the ownership, but what happened is his kids, who were young, were now being teased and yelled at and all that other stuff in school about Tony, because Tony was really popular. So the next year, Kenny went back into the broadcast booth, and Alvin was fired, and the whole group left. So Larry Himes came in, and I called him and welcomed him aboard, and I said, looking forward to working with you. This is a great conversation. Looking forward to working for you, Larry. He said, we'll see.
So,
we'll see.
When you arrived,
And about 4 days later, I got the letter. It says, you've been terminated. And that was my last shot at it.
when you arrived in Detroit, tell me how much you learned from Bill Freehand. I know that obviously, Bill Freehand did a lot of great things, and of course you ended up doing the majority of the work in the postseason. But what was your relationship like with Bill Freehand? Did he teach anything at all, or what were you able to gain from him?
Well, because I recall, Bill, he was on the disabled list. So because he was on the disabled list, he wasn't at the ballpark much.
Okay.
So I really didn't have many conversations with him. But when he did come in, we would talk about certain things that are germane to the game itself. And for example, who of our left-handed pitchers that will come out of the bullpen can hold a guy on? That I needed to know, because then that changed how I thought about what I needed to do as a catcher, because I could throw.
Right.
I need to know if this guy's got a slide step, or if he's slow, or he's quick, or whatever it is, then I can call pitches a little bit differently. So that kind of information about it, like Mickey never threw to first base. I mean, I didn't know that until I got there, and I said, Jesus, I could have stolen off Mickey if I'd have known that he never went to first base. If he did, it was one of those basketball toss. Right. So that kind of information was things that we talked about, but it was very, very little. It was more the technical sides of what you need.
Now, one of my good friends, Barry Foote, tried to take the route you're going. Of course, he had, I know you probably remember Barry Foote, formerly with the New York Yankees, but he tried to take the minor league route, and then he eventually got out of baseball like yourself. So I can appreciate a catcher, paying their dues in the minor leagues. The story relates so well. But that's
Barry Foote.
Yeah, Barry Foote.
Yeah, I met Barry. He was in Montreal, and he's right behind me. And he was managing, when I lived in Connecticut, he was managing in Double A for, I guess it was a Tigers organization. Yeah, I went over and we visited. Yeah.
Yeah, Barry's been a good friend of mine since our days working together for the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, and I've known him since. So you talk about great baseball relationships. That's one of them.
Yeah. Well, tell him hello.
Well, I will, and I will after I probably contact him tomorrow and let him know that you came on the broadcast. I'll get him involved with this visual broadcast. So, with that said, being the catcher position, tell me, why does it produce a lot of good managers? Because I know that the IQ is really high, knowing you see the whole field behind the dish, and you can read into pitchers and you interact with the umpires. But why do catchers make such good managers?
Well, first of all, great players make great managers. I've never met anybody that would not admit to the fact that the player makes the manager, not the manager the player. If you really look at how baseball works, if a manager is smart enough and he has all the tools available, for example, if he's able to have guys that will execute a hit and run, a run and bunt, or squeeze play, or if he's got that kind of set of tools, he's got tools in his toolbox that makes him better than the other manager because he can execute them when he needs them. So I've always felt that I could be the brightest guy in the world in baseball on the field, but if my guys can't do what needs to be done to win, then I'm not a good manager. So my job then becomes the motivator to make them want to do things that they don't want to do. That's what a good manager does. And that's where Sparky Anderson was so good.
Right.
He had great talent, but he could get them to do things that he knew would win a ball game for him. And once they understand that, see, if a ball player understands that what you're doing is not to hurt him, but to win it all or win, then he will do the things he's supposed to do.
Yeah, I can appreciate where you're coming from.
So a catcher sitting one side of the field, he looks at all of it.
Right.
He knows what he's going to do with the pitcher before he ever sits down and squats to give a sign. He knows where he's going to go with the sets of signs. So he has to look at the defense and see if they're asleep. And you have to be very subtle about how you move them, because the hitter goes, oh, really? Because now they'll start to think differently than they may have when they came to the plate. So that chessboard is always, always, always active. And that's what's the fun part of the game.
Yeah, well, you talked about bench coaches, obviously, earlier, and I don't think that they get enough credit for what they do nowadays versus what their role. I don't even think there was a bench coach back in the day, but now that coaching part is a lot more emphasized today, isn't it?
Well, they didn't have bench coaches.
Right. Exactly.
When I played, the manager ran the ball club. I mean, he ran the deal. And but what you do is all you have to look is see who the managers are in the big leagues right now, and you find out where they came from. They come from organizations that had somebody sitting that they learned from in the minor leagues all the way through, doing the same things that the big league club wants, and the manager wants a guy sitting over here giving him the information for him to make the decision. Nobody likes to make bad decisions.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. Somebody obviously has to defer, and unfortunately, and I work with Don Mattingly, and I got to tell you, Don Mattingly, to me, is one of the most underrated managers in baseball. Do you feel that nowadays that a manager has to be a lot more even keeled with everything that's around him, as well as a bench coach?
Well, like I said, my belief.
Yeah.
I can't, because I'm not in the big leagues and have never done it in the big leagues. I believe that the manager today is the person who is the interface with the press on behalf of the owner. Bertie Tebbetts one time told me, he said, you know what managing is? He says, that's to keep all the unhappy people happy.
Right.
because everybody wants to play. So if you can keep the unhappy people from not being unhappy, but so-so, and give them enough playing time so that they feel they're valuable, then you're managing well, even if you're short on talent.
Very interesting. So, let's obviously, what do you like to do with your free time, Duke? I know, do you see many baseball games, minor leagues, or you know, I'm sure that obviously, there's a lot of different things that you like to do now that we're getting acclimated.
No, I go, they built the #1 stadium in the minor leagues right over here. It's about 6 minutes from my house. So last year I saw maybe 15, 16 games.
Right.
And of course, I'm really lucky because the president, general manager, CEO is a friend of mine, and I call him and I say, I want to come to the game, and always get the great seats. Then I have a friend of mine who's the scorekeeper for San Francisco and Oakland, does it half of the year, and he's got 4 seats right dead behind home plate. And I say, you going to the game? And he says, no, you want to go? And I say, yeah. So we go over and sit and watch ball games. Yeah, I do that. But this year they shut everything down, so haven't had a chance to watch them.
Okay, and let's go ahead and so you're obviously acclimating to the Zoom thing. I'm having a lot of fun. George Eichorn had to leave a little bit earlier, but that's beside.
Well, I think you ought to Zoom everything, because if you can put that out where you see animations and hands moving and talking, it's different than the voice. It's like we were talking about back in the day. We grew up and they had the 2 bats, and that was a home run, or bang bang, that was a double, like that kind of thing. This visual, people learn, understand, trust things based upon 3 things: what they hear, what they see, and what they know. So the more you Zoom, the better you're going to be. I believe, because I enjoy talking to people face to face.
That makes
If I had a phone in my ear would get tired.
Oh, you preach it. Hey, listen, I'm having a lot of fun. I can't get to Las Vegas at the moment, but I feel like I'm the closest thing to it with you right in front of me.
Do you play golf?
What's that?
Do you play golf?
Well, another lifetime ago I did. That was before a few shoulder operations, a back operation, and all the other 9 million operations that I've had. I wanted to make a hockey comeback, but fat chance of that.
All right.
Well, operations.
Just so you know, I have moved to the forward tees.
You did, huh?
Yeah.
So,
whenever you get a chance to come, you're always welcome, and I'd love to sit down with you again. Anytime you want to do some more of this, I don't mind doing it either.
well, you know what, Duke? I feel like fate. I was glad that we became Facebook friends, but it took that ironic post to contact you. And I tell you, I had such a blast talking to a guy that I knew quite well back, in '72, and now I feel I've gotten to know you a lot better here on the Sports Exchange. So just to let everybody know, you are listening and watching the Sports Exchange here. And the way to go ahead and get the audio broadcast is through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. To reach us as well, my Twitter account is @TribuneSouth. That's @TribuneSouth. Facebook, you can like the page South Florida Tribune. Instagram, South Florida Tribune Gets It Done. And this broadcast will be available on my YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. Our email, if you want to email me or Duke any questions, you can do so at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And what's good about the South Florida Tribune website, www.southfloridatribune.com, is we have columns from our columnists as well as our media distribution partners, and the broadcast can be picked up. And Duke, I can't tell you, it's been an absolute thrill having you on this show tonight. And obviously I look forward to bringing you on again, and I've got your home number, so I look forward to just picking up a phone and talking baseball. We'll work it out again, but I want to thank you very much for being on the broadcast tonight. I've really, truly had a lot of fun, and I hope you've enjoyed this experience with us as well. So
I have, and thank you for befriending me. That's even the better thought.
oh, well, you know what? You're a friend for life, and I'll tell you what, like I said, I always admire you. Now I can say that I shared a screen with you, and when the time comes to get to Vegas, I know how to get a hold of you. So,
Yes, you do.
meanwhile, on behalf of Duke Sims, a former Detroit Tiger, New York Yankee, etc., my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we look forward to doing this again. I will say on behalf of Duke and I, please take COVID-19 seriously, okay? You got to be safe out there, wear the mask and social distance, and do whatever is necessary. So once again, good night on behalf of Duke Sims and myself, Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Good night, everybody.